Hello again to all the new joiners. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening from wherever you are joining us from. We are excited to have you here today. And yes, we are very excited to kick off this webinar. A very warm welcome to this webinar on transforming education financing through innovative finance in a post-grad world, which is being co-organized by iGravity and the Education Finance Network. My name is Saskia Sickinger, and I'm here on behalf of the Education Finance Network, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. We are delighted to have you here with us to explore how this innovative approach can help expand and strengthen education opportunities globally. As public education budgets decline and traditional donor budgets are being cut as well, the global education ecosystem is facing a critical financing gap, especially in lower income contexts. Impact-linked finance is emerging as a promising model, linking financial incentives and social results in learning, access, and inclusion. So today's session brings together Lucas Jan from iGravity, the co-managers of the Impact-Linked Fund for Education, Hina Mian from the Jacobs Foundation, a co-founder with SDC of this fund, Rama Kayali, the co-founder of Little Thinking Minds, and Rob Al-Hadef, the co-founder of Jackfruit Finance and Jackfruit Network. They will share how ILF is being applied and in practice, the lessons emerging, and what this could mean for scaling impact-linked finance across the education ecosystem. Moreover, we are extremely glad to have Stephen Geiger here from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, for the keynote address to set the scene. As a key partner supporting innovative finance in education, SDC will share how and why this agenda is important from a development cooperation perspective, and how these approaches, such as impact-linked finance, fit into the broader efforts to strengthen education systems and expand opportunities globally. On that note, it is my pleasure to hand over to Stephen Geiger from SDC.
Thank you very much, Saskia, for this kind of introduction. Yes, as you said, my presentation will focus on why is impacting finance important for the Swiss corporation. Well, at SDC, we think that impact-linked finance, like other innovative finance mechanism, can contribute to reduce the funding gap to achieve the SDGs, and in particular, in this case, the SDG 4 on education. Therefore, scaling private sector engagement is a priority for the Swiss corporation. And this cooperation with Jacobs Foundation on the impact-linked finance for education is our biggest private sector engagement in the education sector. Second, SDC invests in blended finance structures to support de-risking private investment in poor countries and to promote impact investing. And this is where we see also the advantage of impacting finance, as impacting finance complements blended finance structures as it incentivizes and strengthens impact orientation of private sector investments. And thereby it helps companies and organizations serve more vulnerable children and youth. And therefore, SDC supports various innovative finance facilities. We are supporting various impact-linked finance windows. One window to support initiatives in the area of climate change, another window that supports gender inclusive finance, fintech companies. And we had also a window supporting companies in East and Southern Africa that are active in the agriculture and climate sector. And the external evaluation of the impact linked facility that was conducted last year actually revealed very positive results, in particular for the impact linked finance window of East and Southern Africa, where the project cycle is of the most advanced. And this evaluation revealed that impacting finance consistently promotes the expansion of services to underserved populations and thereby increases access to essential goods and services, and thereby also promotes inclusivity. The external evaluation also revealed that over 50% of the finance companies are able to raise uh, additional capital between 26 to 100% of the existing capital base of the supported companies. So these are some very encouraging results. And the third reason why we impacting finance is important for SDC is that we think impacting finance can promote innovations that contribute to better learning outcomes of children and young adults. For example, edtech methods can contribute to improve teacher training, or they can also help to improve the efficiency of education programs. For example, there are several edtech companies which develop tools to improve the management of schools, both private sector and public schools. And we think that some of these innovations from the private sector can be upscaled by being taken up through by the public education system. And finally, vocational skills development is a priority for SDC. And in this area of vocational skills development, the cooperation with the private sector is key. And in this initiative with iGravity and Jacobs Foundation, actually, SDC and Jacobs Foundations are very complementary, as Jacobs Foundations brings its expertise in the area of basic education, and together we cover actually the lifelong learning cycle. And SDC support, financial support, is earmarked more for vocational skills development and on sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East region. And Jacob's investment has more focus on Latin America and basic education. So that's a nice transition to you, Hina.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Hi, everyone. I'm Hina from the Knowledge and Learning team of the Jacobs Foundation, which is a private foundation based in Switzerland. Our aim is to give every child the evidence-based learning opportunities that they need to thrive. So how do we do this? Next slide, please, Lucas. Our approach is upheld by three core pillars. First, we fund rigorous research and evidence on learning, for example, through our programs on the Research Fellowship, Research Prize, and the Learning Variability Network Exchange. Second, we harness public-private partnerships by working with governments, multilateral organizations, and private actors to leverage our funding and scale programs at the national level, as can be seen in our work in Cote d'Ivoire and in Ghana, for example. Third, we influence the future of global education and its financing by representing global philanthropy within some of the most influential education bodies, such as initiatives by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and by collaborating with some of the premier education financing institutions, including the Global Partnerships for Education, Education's Multiplier Fund, GPE, and the International Finance Facility for Education. Now, the essence of these three pillars is reflected in our support for the Impact Linked Finance Fund for Education, co-managed here by iGravity, where we bring our focus on advancing good evidence to the public-private partnership that we have with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, as Stephen mentioned, to leverage our complementarities and innovative financing for education, in this case, particularly by focusing on social enterprises. Now, I'm sure my fellow panelists, Lucas, Rama, and Rob, are going to do a great job of illustrating how the impact-linked finance mechanism works in practice. So I would like to speak to the relevancy of this approach in the context of today's challenges in education funding. Next slide, please, Lucas. And I want to do so by offering a three-pronged structure on the points of availability, accessibility, and effectiveness when it comes to education financing. Now, on availability, Saskia implied this in the beginning, and you've heard from Stephen that there is a significant shortfall in education financing of about 97 billion US dollars. The challenge is not just about the funds being available in the near term, but also being available sustainably in perpetuity in the long run. And this is where the focus of impact-linked finance on market-based social enterprises becomes salient. These are mission-driven businesses that seek to provide services improving learning outcomes such as access, such as teacher training, such as literacy, numeracy, socio-emotional skills, to generate revenue that will sustain the provision of these services in a virtuous cycle. And so that's what makes this really attractive as an opportunity, tackling the availability of funding issue. Second, however, when funds to support such social enterprises are available, they're not always accessible. And that's because conventional financial products can be mismatched against the unique capital needs arising from the unique hybrid business models of these social enterprises. Now, impact-linked finance offers several different types of outcome-based payments. And when we think of which organization to partner with through the fund, we think of what kind of mechanism is the best fit for them. And we think very uniquely of the financial additionality that that mechanism can bring to the social enterprise that can allow them to also benefit from the nature of that particular mechanism. So, for example, where typically a social enterprise may not be able to borrow money from a bank because it doesn't have a traditional credit history. In the case of the Impact Linked Finance Fund for Education, we would see financial additionality and potentially providing an impact linked loan to support that enterprise in building the credit history that can help it secure financing in the future and in the long run. And we've done this, for example, in the case of SOS, or Save Our Souls Ghana. And third, it's not sufficient for funding to simply be available and accessible. It has to be used effectively to support what works and what is backed by good evidence. And evidence shows that the quality of education services matters. It results in improvements to learning outcomes and cognitive skills that have really massive, positive, significant macroeconomic effects on national development and economic growth. I've cited two studies on this slide here. As a form of outcomes-based finance, impact-linked finance also necessitates that organizations have to demonstrate that they can achieve predefined key performance indicators, KPIs, or outcomes. So they have to show that they are, the quality of their services and what they're providing is affecting change. But in our model with SDC and iGravity and Roots of Impact, we recognize that not all organizations are at the same level when it comes to the capabilities to generate data and evidence to show that they've achieved those outcomes, and to actually use the data and evidence in their decision making to improve the services that they can offer. So it's been very critical for us to include through the fund a technical assistance offer that we offer to these enterprises to help them develop these evidence generation and use capabilities. Next slide, please, Lucas. Thank you. So I would like to conclude by way of comparison in summary between impact-linked finance and outcomes-based finance more broadly. Now, as you can see in the slide, through the overlap of the two in this Venn diagram, both of these mechanisms aim to scale what works. Both of them can include technical assistance that is provided to support the generation and use of evidence, and both of them have funding that is conditional on outcomes. Uniquely, however, through impact-linked finance, funders such as ourselves are seeking to enable sustainable education systems by rewarding mission-driven and market-based organizations for the additional and demonstrable improvements that they're making to education outcomes. So on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Saskia and the panelists, and thank you all so much for listening. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Stephen and Hina. We're very excited to hear now from our practice and practitioners side. So thank you so much. And Lucas, over to you.
Thank you so much, Saskia, Hina, and Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lucas. I work for iGravity, and as previously mentioned, we manage the impact-linked fund for education. So a lot has been said about the challenges we're facing. So let me highlight how we at iGravity are contributing to solving these issues. At iGravity, we believe in the power of entrepreneurship and local entrepreneurs, such as Rama, Rob, and many others that we are working with, to address development challenges with innovative, affordable, and contextualized products and services. At the same time, I really believe that basic education should be a public good, but it's first and foremost a human right. Unfortunately, as we have heard, in many middle and lower income countries, governments cannot ensure access to quality education for all children and youth, which creates the education gaps that Hina pointed out very well. This is where our impact-linked fund for education comes in. The fund raises philanthropic capital from donors and foundations and uses it to provide financing to impact enterprises. These enterprises provide or enable affordable access to quality education and skills development through their products and services to underserved children and youth. What's special is that the financing is linked directly to the impact these enterprises generate, such as improved literacy, higher retention rates, or better vocational skills. So for example, if a teacher training company or an edtech provider shows that their products truly improve student results, they are rewarded financially. This financing should allow these enterprises to keep their impact focus, but also grow their business commercially and ultimately scale their impact. The Impact-Linked Fund for Education was launched in 2021 with support from our partners, the SDC and Jacobs Foundation, and has since then financed more than 10 organizations, mainly in Sub-Saharan Africa and the MENA region. On this slide, we see an overview of our achievements so far. What is striking to me is that our financed portfolio organizations, such as Little Thinking Minds, are already reaching more than 3 million children and youth. But thanks to our financing, or the financing provided by Jacobs and STC, they will be reaching 150,000 children and youth more on top of what they are already doing. Equally important, our financing should help these enterprises in raising more than 20 million US dollars in repayable capital in the upcoming years. Again, allowing them to scale their business and reach even more underserved children and youth. But we are not there yet. That's why we are extremely happy to have received renewed commitments from our original donors, which will allow us to scale our work with a global outreach. Our ultimate goal is to grow the fund to $100 million by 2030. With that scale, we can reach directly over 2 million underserved children and youth worldwide. Our strategy also foresees to have a stronger emphasis on skills development and work with enterprises active in early childhood development, which is critical for long-term opportunities. We continue to focus geographically on Sub-Saharan Africa and the MENA region, while also expanding into Asia and Latin America. Finally, as Hina mentioned, we are working closely with our evidence partners, Dalberg and Sagana, to ensure that every dollar spent translates into measurable verified outcomes. That way, funders can be confident that their support is truly changing lives. So in summary, the Impact Linked Fund for Education is about turning today's education crisis into an opportunity by financing organizations not just to grow, but to deliver real lasting impact for children and youth. And I'm really happy that with Rama and Rob, we have two entrepreneurs speaking after me who can show how this is done in practice. Thank you very much. Back to you, Saskia.
Thank you so much, Lucas, for this overview. And as you already indicated, I'm glad to hand over to Rama now for your part.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. So just to give you a brief about what we do, we are called Little Thinking Minds, and we are a MENA-based company. Our headquarters is based in Jordan, and we have offices in Dubai, Cairo, and Saudi Arabia. What we're focusing on is learning poverty. 70% of students and children in the MENA region struggle with learning poverty, meaning they're unable to read or understand a simple text by the time they are 10 years old. And so our goal is to focus on improving Arabic literacy outcomes for 100 million students in the region. Next slide, please. So we built online digital platforms that work online and offline, collating content from the region. So we have books, videos, worksheets, assessments, providing a gamified journey for students. And we apply this platform in public schools and private schools in the region. Our business model and the way we are sustainable is by reaching the private schools, but our goal is impact focused. And in order to reach the public schools, this is a very long sales cycle, donor funding is drying up, and it's very hard to be able to scale in the public schools. But we have done some work there, and now what we want to do is continue this work. And this is where ILFF has come in. But before we talk about ILFF, just let me give you some example of our evidence-based work. So by working in public schools, we've done third-party impact evaluations, comparing treatment to control groups, and our programs improve literacy by 25% when you compare control to treatment. And because of that, now the time is urgent, and the time is now to be able to scale this, especially in the region where we have millions of displaced children, maybe over 15 million displaced students due to the regional wars and conflicts, especially now even with Gaza and with all what's happened in Libya, in Yemen, and all these other countries. So the time now is to scale our products. And can we go to the next slide, please? And we do this by this is our reach so far. So today we reach different countries in the region. Some of them are private schools, so we have the Gulf countries, and this is what helps make us sustainable. So our model, we're a SaaS company, we sell to private schools in the GCC, and this helps us, manage the 70 people that we are and keep growing and investing in technology and in AI and in having adaptive and personalized learning paths. But because we want to reach the marginalized children, it is very hard to do that with the long sales cycle, with the donor funding drying up. And when we go to fundraise, we are venture backed. And our investors are not interested in scaling. At the end, they want a return on their investment. And when we were looking for impact investors, it was very hard to find them, especially in this region. Fundraising is especially hard now, and especially for edtech businesses and those focused on impact. We work in public schools in the region, and what has helped us continue our work in the public schools is having support from ILFF was instrumental in that, because the funding they gave us has helped, and because they linked the funding to impact, it allowed us to be able to stay working in these public schools, to be able to tell our investors, look, we have discovered we have funding for these schools, so don't stop the work we're doing. We'll continue the other work we're doing, but this is where we want to be. And they gave us ambitious targets. So we're looking at reaching marginalized students, low-income students, and also tying funding to learning outcomes improvements. And what this has done is also kept us laser focused on achieving impact. And so this is our story when it comes to fundraising and the ILFF role in making sure we stay on track when it comes to focusing on impact and overcoming the funding difficulties edtechs have when they want to really reach those who need it the most, to close the education gap and to have learning equity in our region. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rama, for your contribution, and very glad to have Rob share from the Jackfruit Finance and Jackfruit Network experience.
Cool. Thank you, Saskia. Hi, everyone. So I think I'm just going to zoom in first, if that's okay, to tell 10 seconds on me, because it kind of explains what we are now building and then why we rebranded recently from Jackfruit Finance to Jackfruit Network and how that links to the impact link loan. So sort of 10 seconds on me. I grew up in the UK, and I ended up in rural Uganda after 8 years working in corporate finance in London. I went there to help an NGO, kind of probably a quite traditional story. But ultimately, when I was there, a 2-month engagement turned into a 12-month kind of beginning of a passion. We were trying to find 2 schools to send 80 kids to. I ended up visiting 300 schools all over Eastern Uganda. I had no idea about what education looks like on the ground in Eastern Uganda, like absolutely clueless going in, and ultimately did not realize, or had never even heard of, a low-income serving private school. So a school started by a community looking to support the people in that community. So as centered on the community as you could possibly be. So eventually we found these 2 schools, and then these 2 schools had never gotten traditional financing. So naively, I thought, okay, I can help. I've got the background. I've had the privilege of all of my upbringing in the UK. I'm going to digitize this school or help them create P&L cash flow balance sheet and go with them to the local banks. And we got laughed out the door. So that is the seed that kind of led to Jackfruit Finance. So I ended up in Kenya, which is our primary area of operation as the Jackfruit Network, but we've recently expanded to Uganda as well. And we started Jackfruit Finance 4 years ago. And ultimately, the first objective of that was to provide affordable financing to schools, help them build classrooms, help them buy school buses, and use technology to do what I had done in Uganda. So to digitize the school, turn analog record keeping and very good record keeping, often 20 years of operations, into something that a traditional financier, which is kind of how we think, although we really are a fintech stroke edtech, can then underwrite and figure out how to lend to. Next slide, please, Lucas. Thank you. So Jackfruit Finance was like the beginning. We started 4 years ago, almost to the day. And ultimately, we're trying to solve the first problem that I learned about in Uganda. So banks underserve schools, blocking affordable credit and growth. And ultimately, what we look to provide there is calendar match loans. So that is where the school only pays back in the school term when they actually have revenue. And we expand schools and we improve educational outcomes. And I know that is a big topic, so I'll I'll come back to that. Increase enrollment and support the schools that are truly serving the communities. Then we learned that many of the schools would go and would pay 30–40% more for a textbook, because we're talking about small schools in the middle of a slum in Kingemi or an informal settlement like Mathari. So there's many link points between them and the distributors who actually provide the support functions to these schools. So we started the Jackfruit Hub, and the Jackfruit Hub provides schools access to like pre-vetted supports and structures, and we're trying to like leverage the scale that we are starting to reach with Jackfruit Finance to negotiate better deals for the schools, so they get some sort of like community strength in purchasing power. And then we were starting to attract more philanthropy and more interest in like testing and innovating how we actually lent to the schools. And this is kind of where our experiences started with impact linked financing. So we started, and that was kind of confusing Jackfruit Finance. And I think Rama touched on this as well. It's really like every dollar has an objective. And this is kind of how we think. And we really want to make sure that every dollar is positioned in the right part of the organization to maximize achieving that objective. So we started the Jackfruit Foundation to unconfuse our balance sheet and P&L on the for-profit side and enable us to test and innovate things that we truly believe can scale onto the for-profit side. So the foundation is 501c3 registered, only objective is philanthropy. And then suddenly we had these three organizations. So we had to figure out how to bring them all together. So we rebranded to the Jackfruit Network. The only objective of the Jackfruit Network, and we come back to this in every decision we make, is to improve educational outcomes. Next slide, please, Lucas. So this is kind of what we've done. Jackfruit Finance has done $6 million of cumulative loans to date. We're growing very fast, 125% year on year. And almost all of that is schools recommending schools, which we're extremely proud of, because if our customers recommend us to other schools, it's a very good thing. Last year, we had less than 1% write-off, because we are also trying to prove that schools are a very good credit risk. Like my experience in Uganda, we got laughed out the door. I want that view to change. I want people to see what we're doing. And look to scale it to other parts of the world. The Jackfruit Hub, we have 56 products and 30 partners, and the foundation's channeled $1.6 million of grants into schools. And we've done 18 climate resilient schools. Ultimately on that we have a much bigger vision on that. It's a slightly strange number maybe. But as we say, like the vision here is to be the largest network serving Africa's education ecosystem. And by that, what I mean is, like right now, we have 206,000 children in schools that we have lent to. We want to tie that back to how do you improve the quality of education in the schools? And I'm sure many people are thinking, well, you lend to the school, you build better classrooms, which is probably improving educational outcomes, but it's not necessarily proven in all environments, and it's not necessarily the highest thing you can improve. So this is where it kind of comes to what our foundation is trying to do. So we are asking for school directors to make a change, and it's a behavior change, and we're asking a lot. And often I think we overlook when we talk about it at like a meta level, that making a micro change in a school for a school director who's been running their school for 20 years, so they really know what they're doing, or they certainly believe they do, is a big ask, especially as an external organization coming in. So this is kind of how we view everything coming together. The big grand vision, and we have two different programs running on the foundation that is testing and adjusting on how we can actually achieve this, is we want to lend to a school. We want to then give the school a tailored recommendation on how they can improve the education in their school the most. Which working on like generative AI and how it can become a recommending tool, because Jackfruit Finance gathers 300 data points in every school we lend to. So we have this data source that we can then leverage to provide tailored recommendations to the school. The recommendations we envisage will often point to the Jackfruit Hub to say, like, if you do this, if you take Rama's solution, for example, which is available on the Jackfruit Hub, then it will improve you the most. If you do this, we will reduce the cost of your capital for your next loan. And then the big thing that we want the foundation to eventually become is essentially a means-tested subsidy instrument. So we lend to 693 schools today. Those schools range from $30 a term as a school fee price point to $300. And sorry, I'm 10 seconds over. I'll wrap up here. To $300 a term as a school fee price point. The variation is huge. So the idea that we can come in and give every single person one thing to improve across the board is just unrealistic. So we want to be able to also say, you should take Rama's solution. And because your school has much lower revenue numbers, because you're in the middle of an informal settlement and you're quite small, but we see huge potential, the foundation that comes in provides the subsidy, which is a means tested subsidy to enable the school to grow. And the whole idea is then by linking it back to Jackfruit Finance, before we lend to a new school, we gather new data. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to have live data in the schools that we lend to. And then the subsidy comes down as the school grows. Now, this is a massive vision, and we are a long, long way away from that. But just to kind of like tie it back, like that is how we want to expand. We're in Kenya, we're in Uganda. We should be in 1,000 schools by the end of the year. So we really want the Jackfruit Network to provide the link point to make everything flow more easily into the schools we work in. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob, for sharing that overview and those insights. That's extremely valuable. And we are glad to move forward now to our Q&A part of this webinar. Thank you, first of all, to the audience. Thank you for sharing your questions already ahead of the webinar and for putting them here in the chat. That's well received. I'm glad to just open, maybe zooming out of what we've just been discussing and asking, our panelists here, what, from your perspective, excites you most about how impact-linked finance can reshape incentives and mobilize capital for education? Where are those greatest opportunities to start off on? And maybe inviting Stephen and Hina to go first from your perspective on that.
Yes, thank you, Saskia. I think, impact-linked finance can help mobilize more private sector investment, basically, in education. And as you've seen, there is an element of blended finance that grants from funders helps also de-risk investments from the companies that are supporting education initiatives in low-income countries. And I think, one of the greatest opportunity for impact-linked finance to make a difference is that it precisely incentivizes and strengthens the impact orientation of companies and organizations which try to serve also underserved populations. So and then thirdly, as I said, also impacting finance promotes innovations, really, that can contribute to better learning outcomes of children and young adults, or improve the efficiency of education programs. And for some innovations, there is a potential that they be taken up by the public education system. And this is where I think scale can be reached. Maybe Hina wants to.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. I completely echo what you've shared, but coming in from sort of the opposite lens, where it's very interesting to see this mechanism gaining traction. And what's most exciting then is for it to scale even further with more private actors, as you mentioned, but also from our perspective, public funders coming in. And the second point that I want to make on this as well is what's exciting is also this focus on demonstrable impact. In response to one of the questions in the chat on how do we measure things, what are we looking at? Lucas highlighted that we do look at one outcome on access and one outcome on learning gains. And I think incentivizing social enterprises to think about how they're measuring this, to think about how they can improve their capacities to do so in the long run is a really promising kind of way for them to think in the future for learning outcomes to be effectively yielded through this mechanism.
Thank you. And if I may, Hina, on that, is there already some key learnings that you have from the ILF education program, or any of examples of some of the technical support you've been given and seen?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Saskia. So Stephen did mention a few in his introduction, and I'm happy to add a couple of more things. In terms of learnings, we have had a few external partners conduct several reviews, and it's been really interesting to see, firstly, that partners have reported that impact-linked finance has actually increased their awareness of impact-linked and results-based financing overall, but more specifically, that technical assistance has been really significant, has been a cornerstone of helping them achieve their targets, with some organizations attributing improvements to their service offer and to achieving the targets that have been set, like attributing about 76 to 100% of that happening to the technical assistance that they've received. And on this, there's a whole range of technical assistance that is provided. Some organizations need a little bit more help in developing or validating their theories of change. Others would find it more beneficial to have support on defining the measures that they're going to be looking at and to establish baselines for those measures. So, for example, on literacy. Other organizations which are a little bit more advanced have been able to conduct quasi-experimental studies. An example that I can give is of Ikitabu, which is an organization based in Kenya that is targeting students that are hard of hearing and deaf, and they provide teacher training and sign language instruction to help sign language literacy. And so they were able to conduct a quasi-experimental study on their offerings, and they did find some positive results, but the sample size was too small. So the significance of that is something that isn't there, but it's still a very promising. It showed them a very promising indication of their offering, and created that incentive to be able to test their approach to refine it further as well. So just to answer the second part of your question on examples of technical assistance offerings, but moving back to the first one on learnings very quickly, I do also want to mention a challenge as well, which is that some organizations have responded that there is a need for upfront capital to actually initiate some of their activities. Now, impact-linked finance by its nature, as Lucas has described, is about rewarding organizations for the additional impact that they've achieved, and that has to be verified. And there is a third-party verifier as well that is a part of this mechanism. But that's not always easy to do, because in order to actually achieve that impact, whether that's increasing the educational offering or changing it, there is a lot that needs to be done. So because upfront capital isn't available, sometimes enterprises might find it difficult to hire the personnel that they require to actually implement their activities in order to achieve those results. So those are two things that I want to highlight, which have been very interesting learnings. So a challenge, and also something that's been very successful in our model through that technical assistance offering.
Thank you so much. And staying in the sort of outcome impact measurement space, we've had a lot of questions on that. It's certainly one of the most engaging aspects as well. Moving to maybe Rob and Rama from your side, very specifically, how is impact measured at your organizations, and how are education interventions funded through innovative finance more effective and efficient? Maybe very concretely also, if you would like to share how the use of data is reducing some of the cost of loans to affordable non-state schools. Rob, in your case, for example, that would be interesting to hear.
Okay, I can go first.
Go for
it. We measure improvement. So the financing is tied to two main metrics. One is reaching more vulnerable students. And so we measure that just by pure numbers. But that's not enough, which is great. So ILFF, we're like, okay, great, we want you to reach these kids, but we also want to know that they're actually learning. We want to see learning gains. And so what we do is we measure improvements in learning outcomes. And so what we do, and we do this online. So the children who are using our literacy platform have a baseline test, like a placement test at the beginning of the year. And we keep monitoring their progress, their usage throughout the year. When we find the usage low, we contact the teachers. We try to find ways to do reading competitions, learning, like how to incentivize the kids to use the program more. And then at the end of the year, so when we say end of school year, so 8 months later, we have an end of year test. And then we compare baseline to endline. And there's usually around 20% improvement. When we applied this program in public schools in Jordan, students were reading one book a year, one story, one book from the library a year, and they ended up reading 100 a year when they were using our platform. So it's using this data to build impact metrics.
100 books is probably more than I read a year. We have basically two different programs running. One that was actually started under USAID with Dalberg or Education Finance Network supporting and like the design piece. So on that side, we were doing baseline, midline, and endline and testing the reading literacy of grade 4 students using EGRA as the testing mechanism. When obviously USAID stepped out, we managed to get Waterloo Foundation to come in and support for us to complete that pilot, which also enabled us to adjust slightly to try and make it significantly more scalable. For anyone who's worked with USAID, it was kind of like becoming a USAID-centered program because we were never going to be able to scale it to the for-profit side, which is always the objective of anything we do on the philanthropy side. So we're still testing there. The difference between the two programs that we're running is the old USAID design program has like a free EdTech training component as well, where we provide that to the schools and we incentivize the school directors to encourage the teachers to go through the programming as well. So then we can tie, we can see the impact of that. We actually have a free EdTech on the foundation side to facilitate that, just to make it more streamlined and easy, but it's quite a simple one. And then we have a second program that is soon to launch, working with IDP Foundation and Global Schools Forum, which is just basically taking out, it's just chopping and changing different ways to reward or create that incentive, and then removing that intervention piece being the sort of free ed tech. And the idea here is that we can A and B test to see which ones are more effective and which ones could create the greatest change at the lowest cost, because ultimately we're always going to be coming back to how much does it actually cost to create this change. Ina's point about the cost of the setup is not to be underestimated. Like, we as an organization are regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya. So like when we create any product change, and a product change includes anything where you reduce the cost of capital to the school, it becomes a new product. So then there's a whole legal and tax component that you have to go through. And this is the kind of thing that's often overlooked when you're in the product design phase for something impact thing. Like, we totally missed it. And then suddenly we were ready to launch this, and our sort of legal team were like, wait, we can't do this until the central bank say we can. So these are these sorts of things that you can overlook. But ultimately, Saskia, like, the way we use technology at the very beginning is we go into a school with an app that we built, which basically takes photographs and digitizes the school as much as we can. And we're constantly striving to make that digitization more efficient and more kind of streamlined, and ultimately make live data. At the moment, our data is pretty static. We have to go back to the school to gather more data because of just what the realities are on the ground. How that will reduce the cost of capital in time kind of comes back to my bigger vision that I sort of shared earlier, where everything links together, and that data and encourage once the director has made that change. I mean, the biggest problem, just to highlight the biggest problem for us, is quantifying education quality in the school. EGRA, EGMA, like these are all tests that we use, but they're not scalable from a cost standpoint. Certainly not for us in terms of how we look to build the organization, because if we want to make it fully commercial, then you have to bake that into your cost of capital and your cost of distributing, and suddenly you have to charge at much, much higher interest rates, which is the complete opposite of what we want to do. So that's just something to also bear in mind, that we are wrestling with constantly and have not solved, but hope that we can or can continue to work towards solving that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob and Rama, for sharing your perspective. Moving forward sort of towards also the scaling part that we've heard from your presentations as well, and Rama, especially you mentioned also some of those challenges. Yeah, from your perspectives, what kind of innovative financing tools would you see making that the biggest difference for scaling education finance? And where do you see also yeah, looking ahead, what do you see as the key conditions and enabling factors for ILF to support that that scaling effort? I don't know if Rama, you might want to come in on that, and I think Lucas, you probably have an opinion as well.
Lucas, you can go first.
Of course, happy to. So, I think ultimately it comes down to funding. I think we've been grateful to work with great partners like Jacobs Foundation and the STC who have allowed us to test things. We tested a lot of things, applying impact-linked finance in basic education in low and middle income countries. As Stephen pointed out, there is an independent evaluation that shows positive findings and results. So we really believe that the model works. Now, to scale, obviously, we need funding. And then I think, and we had these discussions with Rama and others, we are always eager to think about, what's best for the entrepreneurs. So far, we work also with impact-linked loans, and we work with what we call social impact incentives, which are payments to the companies if they reach certain predefined impact targets. But for example, as Rama pointed out, upfront capital is a struggle. So with the social impact incentives, these payments come only after 1 year. And this is something that we are obviously aware. So for example, our partners at Roots of Impact have launched a new instrument called the Simple Agreement for Future Impact, SAFI, which is basically very comparable to a simple agreement for future equity, but companies can lower the repayment of the amount if they achieve more impact. But the companies receive this amount upfront, and then they can really work with this. So I think this exchange with donors, but also with enterprises, I think for me this is absolutely key, because obviously donors want that their funding is spent efficiently, and enterprises want also to maximize their work with the funding. So I think for me this is one of the key criteria that we need to continue when we want to scale.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I would add to that. Definitely what Lucas said about the payment coming in a year later was very frustrating for us when we first signed for this financing instrument. But Lucas and team were very helpful, and they were very collaborative, and they allowed us to get some upfront payment as portion of it at least, which helped us hire and start mobilizing faster than waiting a whole year until the first funding came in. And what's great about this kind of financing is that it allows us to be innovative and experiment without, and while keeping us razor focused on impact. So there's not much interference in the solution itself, as long as we're achieving the impact metrics that we agreed upon, which gives us the freedom to, be resourceful, be creative, and just work towards that. I think a challenge also, I would add, Lucas, is that sometimes it takes time for impact to show. So, we assume that we're going to launch this program and there's going to be so much improvement, or the funding, like Rob, or building more schools, but it takes time. And I know it's a 3-year loan, it's a 3-year financing, but the money comes in every single year. And sometimes that year is not enough to prove the impact. And so this is where also there needs to be a bit more flexibility on working together throughout the duration of the program to build this, to co-create this.
Thank you so much, Lucas and Rama. That is extremely valuable and very relevant to how we can move this forward as well. So looking ahead and also basically to the future, we hope that this session has provided a good starting point, an overview, and to this discussion on impact-linked finance for education. Thank you very much to our speakers and participants today for this insightful discussion. We hope to continue that discussion in the future, and we hope these ideas will continue to inspire collaboration and further connections as we expand the work on innovative finance and solutions within innovative finance for education to reach more children and youth holistically. So thank you so much for your time. If you are interested in further education finance discussions and insights, do join us for the Education Finance Network. And we are glad to hereby stay connected and see you hopefully very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.